CEO of Tourlane, as well as your moderator, Josh Constein. Warm welcome, please.
So we're here in the home of $45 million funded Tourlane, and you're here from the United States, their investor. Does that mean that every time people come to Berlin, you have to play the tour guide for them?
No, actually not. I mean,
or is that, do you have interns for that now?
You know, I mean, if Andrew comes, I've showed him around, but it's not, I mean, by now he has seen Berlin, I'm pretty sure, quite a bit.
Okay, so you have to just be fiercely passionate about the travel space to compete. There's just so many different people trying so many different things in this space. And this is your second company that you've built in this area. So what is your superhero origin story that makes you the right person to start a travel startup?
Yeah. So to answer this question, let me take you back 20, 25 years. I grew up in a small city in the south of Germany. It's called Heidelberg. Together with my co-founder, whose name is also Julian. And back then, I remember going to offline travel agencies together with my parents. And I remember walking in there and then getting out with a stack of big, thick catalogs. And afterwards, we would sit down and go through the catalogs trying to find a good deal. And I mean, growing up, Julian and me, we traveled quite a bit, mostly to places like off the beaten path. And throughout those trips, we realized one thing, how frustrating and how time consuming it actually is to plan such trips. I mean, if you think about it, you go through millions of websites, you buy guidebooks, you talk to friends, and at the end, you spend more time planning the trip than you're actually enjoying it. And this was for us the moment when we said, okay, why not combine the service of an offline travel agency, very similar to the ones that we used to go to with our parents. And we combine that service with the speed and the comfort of the internet. And that was how Tourlane was born.
So I think everybody out there loves to travel. Like if you ask people, they're like, everyone's a foodie and everyone loves to travel, right? And so I feel like just having that passion or having experience traveling can't be enough. What is it that makes you want to stick in this industry? And philosophically, why do you care about waking up every morning and doing this?
Yeah. So I mean, my first company, as you said, was also in travel, and this is also where my passion for travel originated from. My first company, it was actually, I founded it out of university together with a few friends, university friends. And back then we wanted to build the biggest peer-to-peer rental company here out of Germany. And eventually we sold our company to Airbnb when they wanted to internationalize from the States here to Europe. And over the course of that time, my passion for travel grew, and overall it's a very, very interesting, very fun space to work at, that on the one side customers love, and the other side also employees love. And it's just a very, very cool product industry to be working in.
Though I imagine if you're working in tours, travelers, they're extremely excited, but they also get pissed off pretty quickly when things go wrong. Does that really make you guys like a customer service company? And how much of the headache and how much of these headaches of these clients do you have to take on?
So when we founded Tourlane, we took one very fundamental decision, which was that we wanted to own the entire customer journey. From the first click, when somebody is in the internet browsing for their next destination, over the planning and booking phase, then the excitement before the trip itself, but also when somebody comes back. And of course, I mean, in general, our mission is to build the best customer experience possible. And that means that also Tourlane is available 24/7 whenever the customer wants to talk to us. When there are things that might go wrong, we are always there to help and eventually create the best trips, best experience, best adventures possible.
That sounds a little bit stressful, but I want to ask you a little bit more, Andrew. So Sequoia has funded Tourlane, Airbnb, and a lot more in travel. How can startups in the audience that are competing in a really competitive space, how do they stand out to VCs and get funding like Tourlane has?
Yeah, I think the reality is that there's a lot of startups out there, and at Sequoia and any of the top VCs, we're investing in each of us 0 to 2 companies per year. So it's about finding not one of many companies in a theme. It's about finding these outliers with special founders. So I think both Julians are exceptional, and the minute they do their first presentation, they kind of jump out of the room as authentic and passionate and super talented, building a great team. Obviously, the product experience, like you actually look at customer reviews on the internet, like they deliver on the customer promise. And finally, it's I think a lot of times companies spend too much time worrying about how they fit into the broader competitive landscape vis-a-vis other startups. Like we have a line that I think Don Valentine coined, which is that most of our companies die from suicide, not homicide.
Right.
And it's about finding great founders in big enough markets and just executing year over year over year, quarter over quarter, and eventually building them into big things.
Yeah, I mean, when you're picking founders, I repeatedly hear from VCs that it's the ones that are the most passionate that they know are going to stick with the problem. And I think we see it on in the battlefield stage right here, and you guys can all recognize this in the audience. When you see a founder that really seems like they're going to do this no matter what challenge they hit, those are the ones you think are going to win. But Sequoia is also investing in more European companies, but you guys haven't traditionally had staff here. Have you guys hired anybody for investing here in Europe?
We have nobody in Europe, but we have plenty of companies that are European companies. And I think I've heard a lot since I've even been here the last 2 hours about our stance in Europe. And I think I was watching this on the internet on the plane over, and I saw yesterday Sebastian at Klarna, where we got involved in 2010 and when it was a small startup in Stockholm. And whether it's Klarna or Unity, which was in Copenhagen when we backed them, or Skyscanner, which is in Edinburgh, or GraphCore, which is in Bristol. We have a bunch of companies here in Europe, but I think the reality is the US market and the Europe market, for most of these companies, is just one big market for customers and for talent. So look at UiPath, who's just on stage, right? They started in Bucharest, Romania, and re-headquartered to New York and have teams across the entire world. You think about companies like Front, where I'm involved. They have engineering in Paris, and they have the rest of the company in San Francisco. So it's kind of this, not thinking about the US market and the Europe market, thinking about it as kind of like the Western world, and we prosecute that from our San Francisco office today.
Do you guys recommend startups that you invest in Europe move to San Francisco, or how do you handle that idea of having the best talent, but also being the most scalable and having the lowest burn rate? Because I think we all know San Francisco is pretty unaffordable.
Yeah, I mean, I think every company is different. So some companies do decide to move to San Francisco or the Bay Area just because that's where a lot of the executives that have seen scale are. We have companies that stay headquartered over here and build offices in the US, and it's kind of a situation by situation deal for us. And
what defines that? Like, what makes you say, hey, this is a company that I think might be better off launching a US headquarters versus, no, this is totally fine to stay at home?
Part of it is where the customers are. So if you're a Europe-based company with European customers, it doesn't make a ton of sense to just go move a bunch of your company to the US. Now, if you're a Europe-based company with US customers, it may make sense. And on top of that, if you need talent in areas that maybe are harder to find in your home market, either opening an office or, if not, re-headquartering probably makes sense.
What kind of talents do you find companies come to the United States looking for that they're not finding in Europe that maybe are opportunities for people to reskill into, or that Europe should be doing a better job of education about?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing here is, I mean, at the engineer level, it's just as strong as it is in the Bay Area. In some sense, being more of a dominant player in a local market is much easier to attract A-plus engineers than moving to San Francisco and competing with Facebook, Google, et cetera. I think the thing that the Bay Area has that's unique today is VPs of marketing that have run $100 million lines of business, GMs, heads of sales, et cetera. Some of these more kind of VP level and above executives that have seen scale, but given the types of companies that we're seeing scaling in London and in Berlin, et cetera, like that market's going to change. And if you fast forward 5, 10 years, I think you're going to have a lot more of that talent in these markets.
Are you thinking about a US office, or how do you think about that decision of keeping your team here? Because I know you guys are Berlin-based.
Yeah. I mean, in general, we see individual trips as a global trend. Therefore, US is, I mean, it's a big market. Right now, I mean, Tourlane was founded here, and right now it's centralized here in Europe. But again, it's a global trend, and therefore this is an opportunity for us.
So you sold your vacation rental startup Akalo to Airbnb. A lot of people, the acquisitions can be really tough. There's so many politics involved, so many moving parts, and it can be really scary actually to be absorbed into a bigger company, especially when they're not going to let your company run independently as a product, but are more going to absorb you into the rest of the organization. What advice would you have to entrepreneurs in the audience who might be going through or considering an acquisition process, to make sure that their team is as satisfied as they can, their product lives on, and they don't just sort of have their legacy, extinguished?
I mean, for us, when Airbnb acquired us, the situation was that Airbnb at that time was fully in the States, and we basically opened up the first office for Airbnb outside of the US. And therefore, for a good amount of time, we basically were here in Europe, and were like able to make sure that we get into the market and set up Airbnb Europe. Over time, then step by step, we closer integrated, and in general, I think it's a matter of time that you need, and also adapt to the organization that you are acquired by.
Did you enjoy that experience of kind of being the European semi-independent arm of Airbnb rather than just being sort of pulled into the mothership?
Yeah. So, I mean, for me personally, when Airbnb acquired us, I was setting up the European online marketing out of Germany, and then after 1.5 years, moved over to San Francisco to work out of HQ. I think in general, it's working out of like an office that is not HQ here in Germany has its difficulties, and therefore it's extremely important that good relationships are built. And for me, it was extremely important to move over to San Francisco as well, and then help out there.
That seems like good advice that if you can be acquired by a company where you'll act as their international arm, you might have a little bit longer to be yourself, be your own company to some degree. But if you are going to eventually be absorbed into the HQ, make sure you're forming the alliances that you need so you can be in the place that you want to, and you're not just sort of some outsider being pulled in. But you also managed to receive investment for your new company from Nate, one of Airbnb's founders.
Yes.
How did you get your boss to invest in your next company? I think a lot of people aren't like, oh man, you're leaving? Like, here, let me give you money on your way out the door.
Yeah. No, I mean, Nate is, he is a mentor for me. I learned tremendously from him, and when I decided to move on from Airbnb and set up my new company, he was very, very supportive, and he gave me a ton of advice. And also then later on, when the product was there and we were starting to raise first capital, he was also one of our earliest investors then.
Does that get a little bit awkward now that Airbnb is moving increasingly into experiences and a more holistic view of travel rather than just vacation home rentals? Are you guys competing directly now?
So I mean, we are in the multi-day tour market, and what we do is we own the entire customer experience. We thereby have travel experts that are the core of our product. Experts who lived either in the destinations, they are trained in destination knowledge. We send those experts up to 4 weeks into the destinations so that they afterwards can consult our customers in the best way possible and really know the hidden gems and hidden spots in the destinations. In addition to that, I mean, we leverage technology to enable our experts and to overall build a seamless customer experience Therefore, we have a model where we are in the same individual travel market, but we have a different approach.
But it seems like I'm trying to see where the moat is there, because it seems like Airbnb has barged into a bunch of new business spaces that I think a lot of people would say, oh, that's going to require too much human capital, or they don't have experience there, but they're just such a massive destination for traffic for people who want to travel that they're able to figure this out. So, what happens if Airbnb were to copy all of that? How would you beat them?
So, I mean, first of all, like building up this end-to-end customer experience is something where you really have to rethink how 21st century customer experience in travel should look like. There are a lot of different components that right now like a travel website, an OTA, cannot fulfill in the way we can fulfill by setting up with this holistic end-to-end view. On the other side, I mean, we are leveraging more and more data to really get our trips better and better. And I think, I mean, this is overall very, very difficult to copy in the entire experience.
I don't know. I hear that holistic approach, which to me feels more like a philosophy than a defensible piece of technology or process, and that it's a lot of moving parts together, which is certainly difficult to coordinate. But these big businesses are used to the bureaucracy of coordinating all that. So I hope to see you guys figure out more on the defensible side of that part of it. So when I tried to book a Tourlane tour recently, an actual staffer from your company called me on the telephone. And I mean, first, like, did you guys know that startups still use telephones? That like blew my mind. But seriously, is that a scalable model?
It is. So I mean, again, our travel experts are the heart of our product. We strongly, I mean, it's not possible for a technology to tell you how it smells when you walk through the Serengeti in Tanzania. It's just not. And therefore, we build the experience around our experts to create this unique adventures and also consult our customers in the best way possible. We are constantly testing new different types of communication channels, phone just being one of them. Eventually, the travel expert, though, is in the heart, and we enable them through technology.
I mean, is it that you make enough margin on these bookings that it's okay to even have humans involved? Because, I mean, look at Airbnb as an example. It's like booking a home, I might spend hundreds of dollars on them, but I never talk to a human being. It seems like an extremely scalable process. So do you guys need to introduce more artificial intelligence or other communication methods to make sure that you guys can actually make enough money off of this process while still supporting a human staff?
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, we have a really variety of trips that we can offer. So we are extremely flexible, from like the €1,500 round trip in South Africa to like the €60,000 scuba diving trip on the Galapagos Islands. We are bundling a lot of different components. So our trips always consist of flights, accommodation, activities, transport, insurance, and then basically, we bundle that in one trip, one package, and when the customer likes it, they can book it. Compared to other OTAs and other travel players in the market who are more focusing on individual verticals, we see a big advantage there in terms of the size then of the trip.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine that people are spending a lot more if they're booking hotels, experiences, accommodations, all in one thing. But I'm just still trying to see how this is a tech business. Like, do you think you should be valued as a tech business if you're so reliant on human capital?
Yes. So,
or maybe I should just ask Andrew. Andrew, do you think they should be valued as a tech business if they're so based in human capital?
Yeah, I think there are. Well, just taking a step back, I think if we look at online travel today, I think there are two things it does really well. Number one is I need a flight tomorrow to Munich before 10 a.m. at the lowest price. Like that's been solved very handily.
Totally.
The second thing is just broad inspiration. I'm scrolling through Instagram. I want to go to the Galapagos Islands. I want to go to South Africa. But what online travel does not do today is, number one, figure out actually how to go book these different things in a foreign country, in a different language. A lot of them don't even accept online bookings. You don't know how to get to the website, number one. Number two, making it all fit together. So, a flight to a car, to a hotel, to a car, to an activity, to a car, et cetera. That is not something that online travel does today. And finally, this notion of a consolidated itinerary, right? Like, think about how many documents you have to save in reservation numbers, confirmation numbers, phone numbers, something gets canceled, how do you change things? Like, all of that is currently not available on the internet, hence why Tourlane's growing so quickly. So I think that's the thing that we appreciate about the business is, number one, wide open market, trillions of dollars of bookings every year. Number two, there is nobody on the internet that can actually do the things that they do in terms of providing that holistic customer experience. And finally, the scalability of the model that they've built, I think, has us incredibly excited about their long-term potential.
So maybe it's less about trying to get the human capital out of the business and more just saying if you're in the right market and you're growing fast enough, then that's plenty, and you don't actually have to eliminate every human. Because I think we see a lot of big tech giants pretending like they're getting rid of the humans in the process, whether it's content moderation at Facebook, or transcription at Amazon. They're saying, oh, we're doing more and more of this with AI, when in reality you learn that it's a lot of humans on the backside. That doesn't make them a bad business. It just means it's a different business.
Yeah, and we care about, just the add-on to that, we care about two things, really. Number one is customer experience. I mean, people come back from Tourlanes saying, I just took a Tourlane. Not, people don't say, I booked my flight on Kayak. They forget that 2 seconds later, right? So there's this customer experience that leads to organic growth and referrals and repeat business. That's amazing for online travel. That does not typically exist on online travel. And the second thing is just building a good business. Like we are all business people, and what we care about is long-term free cash flow generation, and whether or not that means 0 humans or 2 humans or 6,000 humans, so long as the business works at a fundamental level and there's a sustainable path towards profitability, we should invest in that all day.
That's great, and I think that's a great point of insight to companies out there, is that you don't have to necessarily eliminate every human in your process as long as you've got a great customer experience. But I wanted to go back to one thing that you said. You were talking about that your agents, they know the hidden gems, right? They know the secret spots. But do you ever feel a responsibility for flooding those secret spots with so many people that they're kind of being overrun, and they might even have ecological issues from that? And are you guys doing anything to offset that?
Yes. So we know about our responsibility there, and our trips that we are creating, that we want to create, are unique experience, and we don't want to create and support mass tourism. I think this is extremely important. Therefore, we really watch out where we send our customers, the types of accommodations we choose, the types of trips that we offer. That's the one side, and then also on the other side, of course, it's about, it's long-distance flights. Therefore, we are offsetting our flights with carbon emission certificates to try to be as sustainable as possible.
Oh, you guys are doing carbon offsets for your trips? That's really great to hear. I would definitely like to hear more, just maybe you could tell me, it's like if you send, it's one thing to send a ton of people to Venice, where it's used to accommodating an insane number of tourists, but to send them on some tiny little back island of Bali in Indonesia, that island may not be able to absorb even 100 tourists a day. So what do you do in those situations to make sure that that those places are being protected?
Yeah. So we work very closely together with local partners in the different destinations. That help us to make sure that the places in the country stay sustainable and are not overrun. And I think this relationship with the local partners is extremely, extremely important to balance this.
Totally. I hope more startups out there will look to that second order of consequences to their business and make sure that they're doing enough to offset that, not just building a great business. But speaking of building a great business, one final question. Maybe you guys could give us just some rapid-fire answers of what are the other spaces that are ripe in the travel business? If you had to build a new company or you had to fund another company, what would it be in the travel space that you want to see built that somebody out there might be able to build for us?
I'm especially curious what Julian thinks.
So I think there's a lot of potential within the inspiration phase, and especially how to leverage social better to inspire people and help them to pick the right next best destination for them.
That's great. Yeah, I think everyone spends a ton of time looking at pretty pictures on Instagram, but there's a very tenuous connection between that and actually hitting that book button, and that's what startups like you really need. So hopefully someone else out there can build that discovery mechanism. Thanks so much to you guys, Julian, Andrew, and thank you everyone for watching.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks a lot.